A true Echo's original story. A mother discovered the daughter she thought was missing for years, buried in her own backyard. A secret buried in her own backyard. The lost daughter. She lived with a quiet ache. Some secrets survived the years, and some refused to stay buried. The truth didn't drift with time. It waited. Patiently, she carried the weight of a missing daughter. And when the truth surfaced, it wasn't hope she found, it was heartbreak. One call, a body, a truth she never imagined. For one mother, the answer was buried in the backyard she never thought to question. Some losses fade, some linger, and some return from the ground beneath our feet. In every life, there are moments that divide everything into before and after. For the woman at the center of this story, that moment came the day she learned she was pregnant. She was barely an adult. The world around her was loud, harsh, and unforgiving. She had no partner to lean on, no stable income, and no family who could help her through what was coming. Every option felt like a punishment. Every path felt like a dead end. She tried to keep her baby for a while. She really did. She held her daughter in her arms in the hospital and believed, even for a second, that love might be enough, that she could fight the world and win. But reality hits differently when you're young, alone, and running out of time. Bills piled up. Threats came from people she once trusted. And day by day, the fear grew stronger than the hope. She made the decision almost no mother ever forgets. She gave her baby up for adoption. People told her she was doing the right thing, giving her daughter a chance at a better life, a safer home, a future she herself couldn't provide. But deep inside, she prayed that the strangers taking her child would be kind, that they would love her daughter more than she ever could. She watched a nurse carry her baby away, wrapped in a soft blanket she had picked out the night before. The hallway seemed endless, and the sound of footsteps haunted her for years. After the adoption, she tried to rebuild her life. New jobs, new cities, new routines. But some memories refused to fade. Every birthday, she imagined what her daughter looked like now. Every time she saw a girl with the same hair color or the same smile, her heart stopped. She never talked about her daughter again, but she never forgot her either. And while the mother tried to move on, the daughter she loved from a distance walked into a life far darker than anyone could have imagined. Because the home she was sent to, the home everyone promised would be safe, stable, full of love, was nothing like that. It was a house where truth was dangerous, where silence was survival, and where the man who claimed to be her father hid secrets in the walls. And eventually, in the ground beneath his feet, the mother would spend years trying to forget. But fate has a way of dragging us back to the fire we walked away from, and her fire was just beginning. This was the moment everything changed. Her daughter grew up in a house that looked normal from the outside. A small yard, a trimmed lawn, a family car parked neatly in the driveway. But behind the front door, the air was heavy, as if the walls themselves knew how to keep secrets. The adoptive father was a man of appearances. To neighbors, he was polite. To co-workers, he was reliable. To strangers, he seemed respectable. But to those inside the home, he was something entirely different. He controlled everything: the schedule, the food, the rules, the conversations. He didn't like noise. He didn't like questions. And he definitely didn't like being contradicted. The smallest mistake could trigger hours of tension. A broken dish, a late arrival, a simple disagreement. The girl learned quickly what fear felt like. Not the loud kind, the quiet one. The kind that follows you from room to room. The kind that makes you shrink yourself just to stay unnoticed. At school, teachers noticed changes. She was smart but distracted, friendly but withdrawn. Her friends stopped hearing from her. Her smiles became brief, fading as quickly as they came. She tried to explain once, just once, to a counselor. But her father found out, and after that day, she never talked again. Isolation became routine. She spent hours in her room, writing in journals she hid carefully, pages filled with questions she couldn't ask and truths she couldn't say aloud. Her siblings saw things too, the yelling, the threats, the manipulation. But in a home ruled by fear, children learn fast. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't repeat what you hear. Don't look for help, because help won't come. The mother in the house, the adoptive mother, seemed to float between denial and terror. To outsiders, she appeared calm. Inside, she seemed like someone living in permanent submission, afraid to challenge the man she married. Years passed. The girl grew older, but the house didn't get safer. The father's temper worsened, his control tightened, his need to dominate intensified. And then, something shifted. The girl began pushing back, slightly at first, asking to stay late with friends, wanting more privacy, needing boundaries that he refused to give. And every time she pushed, he pushed harder. The home that was supposed to protect her had become the place she most needed to escape. And soon she would try. But the cost of freedom was everything. Inside that quiet suburban house, the girl had learned to live like a ghost, moving softly, speaking carefully, avoiding anything that could spark her father's temper. But long before the night she vanished, the foundation of this home had already begun to crack. From the outside, her adoptive father looked like any other working man. Early mornings, late evenings, predictable routines. But anyone who got close enough sensed something off. Not immediately. His darkness was subtle, the kind that hides behind discipline, behind rules, behind the image of a strict but responsible man. Yet his past carried signs. Faint at first, then unmistakable. Years earlier, he'd worked at a small repair shop where co-workers recalled sudden mood shifts, snaps of anger over nothing, long periods of silence, and an unsettling fixation on younger employees' movements. Rumors drifted through the workplace. A teenage assistant quit abruptly after a single shift. A parent filed a complaint that went nowhere. A neighbor once reported hearing shouting in the middle of the night, only for the man to answer the door, calm and collected, insisting everything was fine. No charges stuck. No investigations lasted. He was the kind of man who kept his mask perfectly intact when authority knocked. But inside the home, the mask didn't exist. The girl sensed his moods long before she understood them. As she grew older, she started noticing the strange habits, the locked shed he never let anyone near, the late-night cleaning sessions in the garage, the way he monitored her friendships, her phone, her movements. She once found a box in his closet filled with old notebooks and photos of people she didn't recognize. When he discovered she had opened it, he didn't yell. He didn't move. He simply closed the box, looked at her for a long, cold moment, and she understood she'd crossed a line she should never cross again. The adoptive mother never spoke of any of this. Her silence was its own confession. In the weeks before the girl disappeared, something changed. She was older now, old enough to recognize danger, old enough to want out. She began pushing back quietly at first, asking for more time at school, wanting to visit a friend, mentioning that she might move out someday. Her father didn't argue. He watched. The last day anyone saw her alive, a teacher noticed she looked anxious. She stayed after class, hesitated as if wanting to say something, then stopped herself. The teacher remembered the look in her eyes. It wasn't fear of trouble, it was fear of consequences. That night, the girl didn't sleep in her room. She didn't leave a note. She didn't pack a bag. But by morning, she was gone. Her father reported her missing hours later, delivering a rehearsed story. She ran away after an argument, a simple sentence delivered with almost no emotion. When detectives questioned him, his timeline didn't match the neighbor's accounts. A neighbor heard the back door slam late at night. The father claimed no one left the house. Another heard digging in the yard at dawn. The father said he was fixing the fence. Still, without a confession or a body, the case stalled. Runaway teens weren't unusual. Suspicion wasn't evidence. Her file was pushed into the cold case shelf, thin and incomplete. Years passed, and then, miles away, a hiker stumbled upon something half buried in a patch of overgrown land. A shallow grave containing the remains of a young woman. No ID, no belongings, no match in the missing person database. She became Jane Doe, another forgotten life swallowed by time. For a long while, the two stories, the girl who vanished and the body in the dirt, remained separate threads. Neither police department connected them. Neither family recognized the significance. Until one detective, reviewing old files, noticed a chilling overlap. Approximate age, approximate timeline, approximate distance the father could have traveled. There was only one way to know the truth. Investigators contacted the woman who had given her daughter up decades earlier. When she opened the door and saw detectives standing there, her world froze. She didn't know whether she was about to mourn her daughter or receive answers she had feared for years. They asked her for DNA. She gave it, and as the sample was sent for processing, a truth slept in the soil, waiting to wake. The DNA results returned faster than anyone expected. When the biological mother walked into the sterile, fluorescent-lit room of the investigation unit, she braced herself for the worst. She had replayed countless versions of this moment, some where her daughter came home, some where her daughter never did. But nothing prepared her for the words that followed, "The body is not your daughter." Relief washed over her so hard her knees almost gave out, but behind that relief came a second wave, quieter, sharper. If the body wasn't her daughter, then where was her daughter? And what happened to the young woman lying in that unmarked grave? Investigators knew they couldn't walk away. A dead girl and a missing girl were now linked by a single invisible thread, a timeline, a geography, and a man who had lived his life in the shadow of suspicion. So they shifted their focus to someone who had avoided scrutiny for years, the adoptive father. At first, nothing in his past stood out on paper. Stable employment, no arrests, no major complaints. But when detectives dug deeper, they found something far more revealing than a criminal record, a pattern. Old neighbors described him the same way, intense, watchful, unsettling. Former co-workers remembered how he monitored people around him, especially younger employees, in a way that felt more invasive than protective A&E. Former girlfriend had once filed a report claiming he wouldn't let her leave the house, but the case went nowhere. An acquaintance recalled seeing him burn large bags of trash late at night, even in the rain. And then there was the shed. Everyone mentioned the shed. Locked, always locked, even from the other family members. Detectives visited the home, years after the girl had vanished. The yard was tidy, the grass cut, the fences recently painted. It looked like a place where nothing bad could ever happen. But something about the ground felt wrong. Cadaver dogs were brought in quietly, so the neighbors wouldn't notice. They circled the yard once, twice, then froze near a patch where the soil looked slightly different, as if it had been disturbed long ago and then carefully smoothed over. A handler glanced up. "They're hitting on something." Detectives exchanged a look. The adoptive father stood at the back door, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He claimed he had no idea why the dogs were alerting. His voice was calm, but his eyes blinked too slowly. The digging began. Shovel hits dirt, a steady rhythm. Clumps of soil turned darker as they went deeper. Minutes passed. Then an officer whispered, "Stop." A fragment of bone, then cloth, then more bone, human remains, exactly where the father said no one had ever been buried. The adoptive mother, who had watched silently from the kitchen window, collapsed into a chair. Years of fear poured out of her all at once, not in words, but in the way her hands trembled uncontrollably. Detectives approached the father, but he didn't flinch. He stared at the ground, jaw clenched, as if he always knew this day would come. The excavation continued into the night. Piece by piece, the truth surfaced, confirming what some had suspected, but no one had dared to say. When the medical examiner finished the preliminary analysis, the conclusion was immediate and devastating. The remains belonged to the missing adopted daughter. She had never run away. She had never packed a bag. She had never left the property. She had been murdered, buried in the same yard where she once played as a child, hidden under the soil that her father had mowed over for years, pretending everything was normal. The crime wasn't impulsive. It was methodical, planned, and buried, just like the life he took. And the biological mother, who had once prayed her daughter would be safe in a loving home, now faced a truth far crueler. She didn't lose her daughter because she gave her away. She lost her daughter because she entrusted her to the wrong man. And the girl in the unmarked grave, the Jane Doe found miles away, was no longer just another unsolved tragedy. She was the clue that tore open a secret that had been hidden for decades. And as investigators closed the grave that night, they realized one horrifying fact. This wasn't a runaway case. It wasn't a cold case. It was a cover-up, carefully constructed, maintained through silence, and only broken because the dead refused to stay buried. The discovery in the backyard changed everything, not just for investigators, not just for the adoptive mother who had lived in silent terror, but for the biological mother, the woman who had spent decades wondering whether her daughter was alive, whether she was safe, whether she had grown into someone kind, someone loved, someone happy. Now she knew. She learned the truth not in a reunion, not in a letter, not even in a memory. She learned it standing beside a stretch of dirt where her daughter's life had ended. Detectives tried to explain gently, but there's no gentle way to say such things. Her daughter had been found. Her daughter had been murdered, and the man responsible was the same man who promised to protect her. The biological mother didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She simply stared at the ground, her eyes glassy, her voice small. I thought I was giving her a better life. Investigators found themselves struggling to respond. Some cases shake even the most seasoned detectives. This was one of them. The adoptive mother, meanwhile, finally broke her silence. She told investigators about years of fear, how she lived like a prisoner in her own home, how the father controlled everything, how she suspected something terrible the night the girl disappeared, but felt too terrified to confront him. She whispered a sentence that stayed with detectives long after the case closed. He told me, if I ever said a word, I'd end up just like her. For the first time, investigators saw the full picture. This wasn't just violence, this was domination, a house ruled by fear, protected by silence, maintained through intimidation. And as they dug deeper into the father's past, more shadows emerged. Old co-workers remembered unexplained disappearances from years earlier, people who simply quit without warning. A neighbor recalled that decades ago, a local girl had gone missing for several days before returning home and refusing to talk about what happened. Even as a teenager, the father had a reputation for cruelty. A boy who trapped animals behind the shed, who watched others with a chilling intensity, who learned early how to hide what he was capable of. Nothing had ever been proven, but all of it painted the same picture. He had been building toward this crime his entire life. When police confronted him with the evidence, he didn't confess. He didn't deny it either. He simply stared at the officers with an expression devoid of remorse, like a man who believed the world owed him obedience, not accountability. The trial was swift, the verdict clear: life in prison. But justice, even when served, doesn't mend everything. When the biological mother attended the hearing, she brought a small pendant she had kept from the day her daughter was born. A tiny silver charm she had planned to give her one day, on a birthday maybe, or at graduation, or the day they finally met again. Instead, she held it in the courtroom as the truth was read aloud. Her daughter never got to wear it. Her daughter never got to grow up. Her daughter never got the life she was promised. But in that moment, surrounded by strangers, she realized something. She'd been fighting a ghost all these years, an emptiness shaped like the child she loved. Now, for the first time, she knew where her daughter was. She knew what had happened, and she knew the fire inside her, the guilt, the regret, the unanswered questions could finally settle, even if it never truly went out. Later, investigators brought her to the site where her daughter had been found. The backyard was silent now, reclaimed by the wind. The grass had begun to grow again over the soil that once hid so much pain. She knelt, touched the earth, and closed her eyes. "The world couldn't save you," she whispered, "but I'm here now." There are stories that end with justice, but this story ends with truth, because sometimes truth is all that remains when the fire burns out, and sometimes it's the only thing strong enough to bring a lost daughter home. She spent years searching for answers the world could not give her, and when the truth finally rose to the surface, it didn't bring peace, only the weight of what she never knew. But even in the silence that followed, one truth remained. A mother never stops grieving, and a story never truly ends. Next on True Echoes. A routine walk home becomes a national nightmare, a stranger in the dark, a uniform no one questioned, and a crime that changed London forever. Coming soon on True Echoes. Some truths survive only in whispers. If you've been listening closely, what details stood out to you tonight? Tell me in the comments. And if you're new here, there's more waiting. What detail changed your mind? Which timeline feels the most reliable? Share your thoughts in the comments and step into the echoes of truth.